Hi, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to the Coaching Call podcast. On this podcast, we'll cover various types of coaching by trainers in sports, martial arts, fitness, and business. We'll discuss each coach's methods to getting the most out of their respective athletes or clients and how they attempt to change the platform in which they coach. Join us on a fun adventure as we discuss unique coaching styles. Coaching is a universal part of how we get others to get something done. Join your host, Raphael, and his guests on this unique journey in coaching.
Hi, I'm Sifu Raphael, and this is the Coaching Call podcast. If you enjoy this episode, please subscribe and leave a review. This episode was made possible by listeners like you. Dale, good morning. Thank you so much for joining me on Coaching Call. How are you this morning?
Good morning, Raphael. It's an honor to be here, and I am doing great.
Awesome. Love to hear it. So we are going to get into who on earth is Dale Young, Coach Dale Young. I love this question because it amplifies who you are, and I have to ask it because it helps me get to know you better. So we're going to go all the way when you were a little guy, running around, jumping fences, climbing trees, or whatnot. And where did you grow up, and who would you say were your biggest influences even before the age of 10?
Biggest influences before the age of 10. Okay, that's a good question. I grew up in Amarillo, Texas. I'm a native Texan, lived in Texas all my life, proud Texan, all that sort of stuff. I did spend 10 years overseas in Australia, so that's part of the journey and part of the story, but that definitely wasn't until later. Growing up before the age of 10 has to be the biggest influences were my mom and dad. Possibly my brother was in there. My brother's 12 years older than I am, so he wasn't around as often as mom and dad were. But dad was one of those that he was a good provider, but he wasn't a very good emotional support. I never got a hug or an I love you from dad, so I was a little bit warped in that direction. Mom, I was a mama's boy, and mom did everything for me. But then about age 6, I actually started having nieces and nephews because, like I said, my brother was 12 years older, my sister was 14 years older. And so I felt like I lost a little bit of mom's love because now she had I had to compete with the grandkids. So, so I was just kind of, I was almost like an only child because brother and sister were out of the house. And so I had this really weird mix of being having siblings, but not really having them around a lot. So not growing up with a lot of their influence.
So your parents didn't have kids and they waited 12 years to have you.
Well, they had brother and sister, and then there was actually a third one in there, but he did not survive infancy. So, but yeah, there was a big gap between my brother and sister and me. I kind of think it was a late life miracle or something like that really got me here. So actually, our whole family is kind of a miracle anyway. Dad was in a very serious head-on collision when he was in his 20s and should not have survived. So this family should not have even been here, really.
So you were definitely a divine intervention, if you will.
It feels that way sometimes, and feels that way more and more the older I get.
Because you realize your purpose, right? As you get older in age, you realize that, man, I matter. What I'm doing matters, right?
Exactly. That's actually what my coaching is all about, is helping people plug into what matters to them, what is their divine design, their eternal purpose. So that's really what I coach around is helping people find that for themselves and then, go follow it.
I love that. And when we consider where we are today, let's go back to when you were that young. And you said, because I'm in a similar boat as you, I did not get I loves you or hugs or anything like that when I was a kid. And when you said that, I was like, I started picturing, I was like, was there ever? And I was like, no, never. But it's weird because people show love differently, right?
Absolutely.
When you were at that age, and I know that you're Christian, you have a religious belief. Was church a big aspect of your life back then?
It was not. It wasn't actually any part of my life. I had
Mm.
an aunt, my dad's sister, oldest sister, who, as it turned out, was one of the leaders of the Methodist Church, and she went all the time. But I went I went to Sunday school maybe I can recall maybe 5 or 6 times growing up, and never actually went to a church service. So it was something of a foreign concept to me.
We'll have to get into what made you turn it around for yourself. We'll get into that a little later on. So your brother is 12 years older, your sister's 14, and you felt like you were a single child.
Hmm.
Uh, when you consider a lot of times when people have that last child, sometimes they spoil that child like crazy, or that child gets away with murder, right? One of the other. Uh, but then you had your siblings had children of their own,
Hmm.
so you felt your affection was being taken away by them.
Hmm.
Was there resentment, or did you realize like, hey, wait a minute?
I don't think that there was resentment, at least not consciously. I think maybe subconsciously there was, but it wasn't conscious. I love my siblings and things like that. But, I have I came across a picture recently from back in that era. And me and mom and dad were up visiting my sister, who was in Chicago at the time. And she had just had her first kid, so my first niece, as a matter of fact. And one of the things that I had bought her, the niece, was a little stack of rings on a thing, where you move the rings on and off. You got to get them in the right order and everything. And the picture is they're sitting on the couch. Mom's holding my niece Kathy, and I'm sitting on the floor, and I'm pointing to the rings and trying to get some attention about the rings, type of thing. And it was kind of that just brought up some feelings when I saw that picture about, oh yeah, I wasn't getting as much attention. I wasn't the center of attention like I had been before grandkids. And I don't think I had even consciously realized that until just very recently. But it was definitely there.
So moving along, you grew up in Texas. When did you start to have someone in your life outside of your family that was a big influence for you? At what age that you recall?
Well, probably the first one was my high school teacher. I can remember one teacher through all of high school, and the teacher was Mrs. Billy Love, and she was a science teacher, and she was teaching general science and physics and things like that. She was also the leader of the Math and Science Club, and so there was part of that going on. I was in the Math and Science Club. I was also in the chess club. I don't even remember who was leading the chess club, but I remember Billy Love as the leader of the Math and Science Club. And anyway, so I was really good in school, got good grades, all that sort of stuff. I was never the troublemaker at home. My brother had been the troublemaker, and so I think he'd kind of broke my parents in. And although I was totally scared of my dad because he was very gruff and used curse words all the time and all that sort of stuff, it was like I kind of knew he loved me, but he just couldn't express it in any form that would really sink into me. And so Mrs. Love was really a good connection, first kind of connection. And she was actually the reason I went off to college and was going to major in physics, because I'd taken 2 semesters of physics with her and really enjoyed it and all that sort of stuff. And so it was like, yeah, I'll go to college. I'll do physics. I can do it. And got into college and figured out this is a little bit tougher than what I thought. So, yeah.
Great, great. So, wow, when you remember that one teacher. By the way, I want to shout out to Enrique Acosta Gonzalez. Thanks for watching, buddy. When we consider, and I remember my teacher was Mr. Kelly. He was an English teacher. So bright, this man. When you consider, you even went into the sciences thinking this is the right path for you because she opened up a vision for you, right? And it's pretty interesting when someone can trigger something for us, right? Moving along, you went to college, you went into physics, and you said, "Oh, it's harder than I thought." Um, what was your thoughts at that point? Where did you say, "Oh, I did I make a mistake, or do I have to just pivot a little bit?"
So it was interesting. I went into physics and they actually told me, well, you can't actually take a physics course your first semester because you have to have calculus. And I had not actually had calculus in high school. So I had to take a semester of calculus before I could take a real physics course. Okay. But they did have this alternative, which was physical simulation via computer. Now, this is 1972 that this is happening, right? So this is real early days of being able to do computer programming. And I took that and I just loved it.
Card.
Well, that was the day of the cards, but this was a special thing. We were actually using teletypes for our programming at that point in that course. And I loved it. I fell in love with the whole process. I knew the physics already well enough that they were doing that I wasn't any challenge on the physics side. So it was just learning the computers. I fell into it, was, top of the class and all that sort of stuff. And so for the next 3 or 4 semesters, I was taking both physics and calculus and computer science. And, I just was kind of doing a dual thing, right? And it got down to one semester, I made a B in physics. I'd always been making B's in calculus, and I was making A's, top of the class in computer science. And I actually kind of woke up and said, what are the job prospects out there? And I said, it's going to be a lot easier to get a job in computer science. So that switched over to computer science and went forward with that. And that was really the key. It was just kind of like, because I'd been working through college and all that sort of stuff, but I actually got a job working in the program that had been the genesis of that first physical simulation via computer. And so I was working as on campus as a computer person before I ever graduated.
Wow, that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. How long were you at that job, by the way?
Well, that job was just a year and a half, something like that. I actually did some tutoring with computer science students to finish out my bachelor's degree, I guess would be how I'd say it at that point. And so then, got a bachelor's degree. I actually graduated summer of 75. So I went through and 3 years and 2 summer schools. And then I got a job with the city of Amarillo, moved back to Amarillo and got a job with the city of Amarillo. Knew probably within 2 months it was not going to be for me. I basically had already mastered everything there. And, it sounds like bragging, but it was just how I did stuff, And then about 8 months after I moved back to Amarillo, I actually moved back to Austin where I'd gone to college and took a job with Eldon Reynolds. He had a startup company. He had actually been the leader of the project CBE, computer-based education, which had been what I'd worked for when I was a computer guy on campus. And so I was back working for my old boss, so to speak, at that point. That lasted a couple of years, and then I moved off to another job, and another couple of years after that, and then got to the job that actually led me to Dallas, that eventually led me to Australia.
So who would you say, because when we move from one position to another, sometimes there's a person who can mentor you. Did you have mentors during those times? And what was the biggest takeaway from their mentor?
I don't really feel, I think Eldon tried to be a mentor to me, but I was too full of myself to really accept it at that time, honestly. Um, and, I don't really feel, well, okay, when I moved from Eldon to this other company, the name was Radian. I did have a mentor there. I got put in an office with Bob Orr and I can't remember the other guy's name, but there was three of us in the office. And Bob Orr was a little bit older, married, had some kids, and he really taught me a lot about dealing with people, which I'd been a little bit on the light side. I'll just put it that way. I was a little bit raw on the relationship side. So Bob Orr actually taught me a lot about dealing with people and how to approach people and how to deal with stuff. He taught me that the whole idea of being a computer programmer or getting a job done with computers, it didn't really matter if you did the job if the people weren't happy. Okay, and so that was a little bit of a turning point for me. A few years later, he actually was the best man in my wedding, so
Oh, wow.
that was good. Yeah.
I had a client of mine who was brilliant with computers, that he figured this is what he wanted to do with school. So he went to computer programming. Yet he knew more than the instructors because they were asking him questions.
Mhm.
So halfway through it, he's there like 6 months. He goes, there's something wrong. How do I know more than them? I'm here to try to learn from them. So he quit. And he was working for a company and they really abused him. And then finally, and he knew more than everybody at the company. He's like, what is going on? And they kept throwing work on him. And so finally he said, okay, somebody realized the kind of person he is. The guy's brilliant. So a guy that had worked with him said, I'm starting a new company. You want to come? He goes, okay. So he did. And the only other person that was smarter than my friend or my colleague, I say client, colleague, friend, because it became all that, right?
Yeah.
And the guy was smarter than him. And he didn't work exactly in the same company, but they did partnerships. So when he hired him, he said, I had to go with him because he was smarter than me. I had no choice. But now it turns out that he's the smartest one again, because the guy's just developing so much. He creates amazing things. And what wound up happening, I said, so are you leaving? He goes, no, because I am being challenged, because thank God that the guy who was smarter than me is smart enough to continue to challenge me. That's the only reason he stays.
Mm-hmm.
He's not a people person at all. That's why sometimes every month I go and have breakfast with him. And so I talk to him about his challenges and try to help him out that way.
Yeah.
But it is interesting when we can be in front of or in a cubicle or in front of a computer, and all we have to deal with is numbers and sequences and Java and all these different things. And we don't have to interact with another person, right? As long as they're happy with the product, then we don't have to interact with them. And that's why he loves computers so much, because he doesn't interact. But
Yeah.
you learned something from this man who became your best man at your wedding, and that's you can't just be in front of the computer, right?
That's right. That's right. I'd say that was kind of the start of that journey. And through the next, I don't know, 10, 20 years, something like that, it was just a growing. It was a slow growing of, I really do care about the people that are using the stuff that I create. And actually, at one point in my time, I was looking back over my career as an IT person. This was probably around 92 or so thereabouts. And I was saying, what satisfaction do I have for all this stuff I've done in IT? And when I look back over it, it was actually not the big projects I was on. It was not the really great technical things I'd done, but it was actually a very specific little project that I'd helped the back office with in terms of they had some problems scheduling vacations and things like that. And they just needed some tools to help them do that. And so I'd built on a simple little database. It was actually in FileMaker 2 or something like that. That was, it was less like Access for a lot of people type of thing. And I got it all set up to take the data from there and put it into a graphical program so it could actually plot out the timeline of when people were going on vacation. They could visually see it and they could line things up on that timeline and such like that. That was the thing that I was actually most proud about, was just this little simple in the technical side, but it really solved a people issue that, that it was like, okay, I get it now.
That's pretty cool. When you went through all of these different things, at what point did you realize that maybe prayer or becoming a Christian was important to you?
So at that company Radian where I had met Bob Orr, there was a lady, and I think her name was Marjorie, if I remember right. It's been a long time. That was like 78, 79 type time frame. And I started dating her, and she started talking about this Jesus thing. And so I started learning a little bit. She got me to pray the prayer. And then all of a sudden, she was not on the market anymore. I couldn't take her out for dates anymore. And so I kind of got jaded and was just really not happy with that. And at the end of that year, this was probably about September, October, that I prayed the prayer and, gave my heart to Jesus. But I didn't really know what that meant. And I had no real life change. And at the end of that year, between Christmas and New Year's, unexpectedly, my mom died, had a heart attack and died. And I was a blubbering mess at the funeral. I was just wiped out type of thing. And I think somewhere in the back of my mind, I had this thing about, well, if this is what it means to follow Jesus, I don't want any part of it. And I turned my back on him. Okay. And so that actually lasted for many years. But God was actually wooing me. When I look back and I look at all the stuff that was happening, he was coming in the most unexpected ways. And finally in 1998, after I'd been married for over a decade at that point, we had started going to church because she had asked me if we were Christian, and I'd said yes because I'd prayed the prayer. But I really didn't know what it meant, didn't really have any life change, but we'd started going to church. And we went to a funeral for the son of a church member. This son had OD'd. And so we went to just support this other church member. And it was in that funeral that they preached the message. And I really started realizing I'd probably heard it all up here, but at this point, it really went down to my heart, and it really sunk into my heart that there really was a God. We really were eternal beings. We weren't just random collections of molecules, and that I needed to turn my life around. And so it was spring of 1998 that happened. I don't remember the exact date, but it was sometime April, May type time frame. And I know that October 18th of that year, I actually got baptized. So that 1998 was the turning point in my spiritual walk of turning back to God and just doing anything I could to serve him after that.
You mentioned earlier that he was wooing you all along. What signs did you see now that you go, oh my gosh, it was there all along? What was a big one, would you say?
So, 1980, I'm at Radian and I get a call from a guy that I kind of barely knew at Radian. And he invited me to come up and interview for a job in Dallas, actually Garland. And he said, yeah, and if they select you, you'll eventually be going to Australia. And it was like, this is interesting. He could have said any country in the world, and I would not have been interested except Australia. And that was because of something that happened way back in 4th grade. So had a music teacher that taught us waltzing Matilda, and I just was fascinated by that type of thing. And so that was one. So I took the job, came up to Dallas, was doing some stuff, was fairly bored there at that time. This was 1980. And I sent off some resumes. Didn't really get any response. Fast forward, I get my clearance because it is a government contractor. I get my clearance. They say, okay, you're going to, so this is 81, you're going to Australia in January 82. And this is like November, right? That they're telling us, get all your affairs in order. So I start getting their affairs in order. Okay, this stuff's going in storage. This is going with me, all this sort of stuff. And I get a letter in the mail. And the letter in the mail is from Apple Computer. This is 1981, okay? And the letter in the mail says, hey, we've seen your resume. It looks really good. We'd like to fly you out for an interview. And this is like right before Thanksgiving, right? And they made it sound in the letter that it was going to be one of these things. If I came out and interviewed, I was going to get the job. If I did what I said I did on my resume, which I did. And it was a real tough decision. Do I go out and interview with Apple Computer, or do I go to Australia? And of course, knowing what we know now about Apple Computer, it was like, well, boy, that was the wrong decision because I decided to go to Australia. Okay. But for me, it really was the right decision. That was one of those wooing points that I look back on and say, okay. So that was one. There was another one where later on, it was like, there was some stuff come up. The real big turning point, just to fast forward and not waste too much time, was in 1992. So I'd been in Australia for 3 years, came back for 2, gone back for another 5 at that point. So I was 8 years total out of 10 years total in Australia. And in 1992, they had started taxing one of the benefits. And we were all at lunch, and I was right in there with them complaining about this tax, right? We're going to quit, all this sort of stuff. And out of my mouth comes this phrase, well, this is just a job, not a career. And it was in that moment that my heart got through to my head, the other direction, so to speak, and said, hey, you're meant for something bigger and something more. I was making really good money. But money wasn't all that I was made for. Okay. And so that was another wooing point. I realized very much later that was kind of a coaching moment. And if a coach had been there, they would have said, hey, wait a minute, say that again, type of thing. Listen. But it was like, I had to kind of self-coach myself at that point, type of thing. But anyway, so that kind of led me from just being stagnant and just taking what was accepted, that came to me in my career. That was where I started saying, okay, I need to be more active. I need to be pursuing something. And that something turned in 1998, like I said, when I got baptized, that turned into pursuing God. And then God has just kind of kept opening doors ever since then.
What's one of the major doors that he opened for you?
I'd say one of the major doors was I heard about life coaching in 2007 as a profession. Okay. Before that, it was okay. Life coaching is just out there, you do it, but you're not going to get any money out of it. And so I started researching it, did a lot of stuff on the internet at that point, could not find anything spiritual. So from 98, when I didn't care about spirituality stuff, to 2007, I said, this is not for me. And I put it on the shelf. So you can see how much I grew just in those 9 years, type of thing. And then in 2009, I'm walking through Half Price Books, and this book falls off the shelf and conks me on the head.
Really?
Figuratively, anyway. Title of the book was Christian Coaching. It's still on the bookshelf back there. And it was like, okay, God, this is what you've been leading me up to, type of thing. And so in January 2011, I started coach training. And then in July, I got my first coaching client. I've always had at least one client ever since then. But I was still working full time in IT up until 2016. And then in 2016, a lot of things shifted. But one of the shifts was I went from full-time IT and part-time coaching to full-time coaching and part-time IT. And I did part-time IT for another 5 years before I finally got out of it, except for the IT work I do for myself now. So,
I know an IT guy. So Christian coaching, that was the big moment you were waiting for.
mhm.
That's why you were building all that you were building. What part of your business background do you bring into your coaching?
Well, being where I came from and where I've come to, a large part of what I bring in is the whole relationship aspect and being able to actually work together as a team to accomplish something greater than what you can accomplish on your own. Okay. That's one of the big things I bring in. I love working with teams. One of the things that happened in the 2005 to 2021 timeframe in the IT world was I actually set up a managed services team at a client down in Houston. It went annual in 2007 for $1 million a year. And I was working at this company that was at that time a $12 million annual company. So it was a pretty big impact on the company. They gave me a lot of leeway and I got to set up the team the way I wanted to get it set up and all that. And so fast forward to the end in 2021, when I left the company, they still had a contract with that client that was down in Houston, and all because we'd set up the team right to start with. So that's one of the things I'm most proud about my whole IT career was that piece. So being able to work together to accomplish a purpose is it's one of the key parts of my coaching system now. I call it the community aspect. The community is where are you spending your time and space, and the time and space is where are you putting in, where are you investing in relationships, where are you growing, who's your support system, who do you support. Everything's mutual. There's everything you give out comes back to you one way or the other. And so investing in community gives you that base, that foundation. And, to take it even to a deeper, more spiritual level, investing in your relationship with God and Jesus, that takes you to a deeper, more foundational level as well.
Wow. So consider what happened with the world, the pandemic. How did that affect your coaching? When we noticed that a lot of coaches were maybe meeting with people, but before Zoom even really got popular, there was all these other platforms that people use, and then Zoom became the biggest player out there. And
Mhm.
Zoom did the right thing. I mean, they made it easy for people to adapt it and consume it. As a coach, how did you pivot during those tough times?
Well, actually, I just kind of doubled down on what I was already doing. I actually had a paid Zoom account back in 2015. So I'd been doing most of my coaching work via Zoom anyway. Part of that is just in the DFW area, the clients I was finding and meeting were typically widely geographically dispersed. DFW thing is when I was living in McKinney before I got married in 2021, it was 75 miles from McKinney over here to the west side of Fort Worth, and that's not even covering the whole metroplex, type of thing. So it was very much a geographically dispersed thing. I was also doing a lot of group stuff, and so getting everybody together in a virtual room was just a whole lot easier on everybody to do that. So I was using Zoom even before the pandemic. So I just kind of doubled down at that point. And it was natural and it worked. But the thing, just to connect it back to the community, the thing that helped me thrive was I stayed connected to my church community. We met as a life group all the way through the pandemic. We would meet to watch the online services at church, that type of thing. And so that was a really good support system for me during that time.
So what is it that makes it so different compared to regular coaching, the coaching that you do compared to, say, life coaching or personal coaching?
Yeah. So the way I'd say it is that life coaching really deals with whatever issue the client has. And so you have to build up a relationship. You have to find the client. A lot of that's very difficult. And especially since the pandemic, there's been so many more people jump into the coaching space, right? And so competition is even fiercer than it was before. And so as a coach, you have to be known for something. And, I'm pushing to be known as the calling coach, so to speak, because I help people find and follow their calling. And part of that is having a system and a process that people can see it's very repeatable, that people can see the steps, even if they don't fully understand them. It's kind of like yourself, Raphael, when you train, you've got a system behind the scenes and you've taken multiple people through it, right? And people can rely on the testimonies of those other people. They can rely on the fact that you've done it for many years. They can rely on the fact that you've had these great results, right? Same thing with me. I'm building up those results right now with all the people that I'm currently taking through my coaching system.
So let's go ahead and discuss the call, because I believe that's an important aspect that a lot of people, even yourself, you were being called and you didn't listen to it, right? You didn't realize that you were being called.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about that. If you don't
Well,
mind. Even your calling, how you didn't particularly listen to that calling, and how you're
yeah,
helping people find their calling.
yeah. So first of all, I believe that every Christian has a specific calling. Okay. We all have a general calling. We all have a general identity. We're all, children of the King. We're all saved and we'll be going to heaven. We're all washed by the blood, whatever type of general identity that applies to all Christians. But we also have a specific identity. The specific identity is, how did God gift us? You talk about spiritual gifts in the Bible. You talk about calling in the Bible. And it says, Romans 11:29 says, the gifts and calling of God are irrevocable. He's not going to take them away. He's put them in you. He designed you that way. He created you with these. And so they're there, but they aren't necessarily just going to come out easily. Now, maybe for some people like Jeremiah in the Old Testament, he knew in his mother's wombs that he was called to be a prophet and all that sort of stuff. Most of us don't have it that easy. Most of us have to work for it. So at least that's been my experience. And it certainly was for me. And so we have a specific identity. Therefore, we have a specific calling. We are all designed for a purpose. And so the identity is what I call the who piece, or the identity piece. Who are you in Christ? Who are you created to be? What's your DNA look like? What's your fingerprint look like? Those types of things that are unique to you. And we have a specific calling as well. How do you figure that part out? Well, I was blessed by God in November 22 to be able to bring some things together in a diagram. And I can make that diagram available for your listeners as well. The diagram, I just call it the calling framework. And it basically takes 4 keys, what I represent as 4 circles. And those 4 circles intersect in the middle, like those classic diagrams. Mm-hmm. And that's where your specific calling happens. The 4 circles are what provides income or impact. Somebody's got to put money in your bank account so that you pay your bills, right? Or if you're at the point where that's automatic, What kind of impact are you making on the world? You're making an impact through your martial arts training and through your podcasting. And you do a lot of podcasts. I know that. So you're making an impact that way. Second circle is, what abilities do you have? Some of us have these physical abilities like you do. I don't. I'm a couch potato when it comes to stuff like that. So, I'm pretty smart with computers. I'm pretty smart with intellectual stuff, and I'm getting better on the relationship side through many years of training and trying. So what abilities do you have? The other side is more on the emotional side. So what makes your heart cry? What are some of the things that happened in your past that maybe you're just really upset with? There's some injustice in the world. I don't know if I mentioned here or not, but I was part of a startup company in the 2000 to 2004 timeframe. We did really great in 2000 and 2002, and 2004 we had to shut down to avoid bankruptcy.
Wow.
That was painful. I'd invested some money in the company and whatever. I'd invested kind of heart and soul into that company. And that's actually where some of my early days of coaching, when I look back at it, started, because I was taking John Maxwell's 17 indisputable laws of teamwork and trying to get that culture into the company, that kind of thing. So I have a heart for Christian entrepreneurs, because I know what it's like to struggle trying to build a business, not only on that one that I was a part of at that time, but now for building my own coaching business. I've struggled through that part. So what makes your heart cry? Maybe for some people, it's a single mother because they've been single mothers. Maybe for some people, it's, they see all this child slavery and sex trafficking and stuff like that. So maybe that's what they're called to. That's where their heart is broken and where they cry. And the last key is, what are the desires in your heart? This gets into Proverbs 20, verse 5. For the passion and a purpose in a person's heart is like deep water, but a person of understanding will draw it out. So I kind of equate that person of understanding as a coach or a mentor or a consultant or whatever. And they help you draw that out of the deep water out of your heart. Okay. So those desires are put in you by God initially. And, there might be some desires there where you're actually going to do really good for the world. Okay. But what makes your heart laugh? What makes your heart sing? Those types of questions. So you put all those things together and blend them down into how do you put them all together? And that's where your calling exists.
I love it. I love it. You mentioned that we all have IDs, fingerprints, and so forth, and we all have a unique gift. We have a purpose, right? And every morning when I wake up after my prayers, the first thing I say right after my prayers is, thank you, Lord, for all the gifts you have given me and for allowing me to share my gifts with the world, with my brothers and sisters. And that prayer, not only do I say it when I first wake up, but I'll say it during the day, and I'll even say it right before I go to sleep. And the last thing is, I'm praying and I go into gratitude as well. And everything that we do should be for a purpose. We should do it with intention. What is my intention for today? A lot of people wake up and they have zero plans. Whatever the day happens, they just go with it. And then therefore they turn around and they go, I have no purpose. Well, yeah, you didn't plan on it. You didn't listen, right? So you didn't listen to the calling. And that's why I said earlier, you were not listening to the calling. You were just going through it, through the motions, I guess. So how do you get someone to realize that they are missing the call, that maybe they got to pick up that phone, if you will, the connection to the top, right? How do we establish a connection to the calling?
If I had the real answer to that, I'd probably be, much bigger in impact than what I am right now. I'll put it that way. I was going to say I'd be a millionaire, and that would just be a side effect of it, but that's not really what you're asking. I wish I knew. Okay, I believe that part of it is just in my particular situation. My calling is to inspire that calling in others, and I feel like all I can do is inspire. I can't coerce. I can't cajole. I can't go in and beat them over the head, although sometimes I'd like to. But at this point, for me, it's just inspiring. Part of it is getting my story out there and saying, hey, look, before 1992, I wasn't listening at all. At least in 1992, I was realizing, hey, there's some messages out there. Maybe I should check them up, type of thing. So that was like the turning point in my life, was that, this is just a job, not a career moment. So I think for me, it's just inspiring people. For other people, it's like, okay, once they're in a situation, like maybe they're in a job loss or something like that, maybe God is going to get their attention through some other means or some other mechanisms. And so, God's going to do it. God's going to do God, right? God's going to do it in his time, in his way, in his situation. And I've learned to just relax into, okay, this is what you've called me to do today. And so I'm going to go do it for me. And hopefully that's going to impact a whole bunch of other people out there.
Absolutely. I thank you for what you're doing and the way you're doing it too, because your impact is affecting people's trajectory, if you will, right? It gives them a deeper purpose, because we may have an understanding, but until we go deep into ourselves, into prayer, into meditation, into who we are and what we're meant to do, we can't really understand what we need to do, right?
Yeah.
We're just going through the motions a lot of times. And so I love what you're doing, because you're kind of shining the light on the person, right? If you will.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like, if you look at the image that we're above us, there's a light coming down and we got stars going. It's a pretty cool background that we're
Mm-hmm.
both in right now.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the calling, I think. It's the calling to do more, but not just for you, but for others, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You have to know who you are, and you have to know where you are in time and space, and you have to know why you're here. And that's the three pieces: the identity, the community, and the calling. And that light, that's not our light. We're just passing that light on. We're just reflecting that light out to the world. And if that illuminates some things for some people, wonderful. And if not, they're going to figure it out one way or the other,
Right.
Sooner or later.
So as a coach, we all know that not everyone we're not going to be everybody's cup of tea, if you will. How do you deal with someone who maybe just needs a tiny little bit of guidance so that they can go to someone else who is going to be better suited for them, right? Maybe they needed you for a short time, and you served your purpose for them, and now they need to move on. How do you help someone understand that you're there just for a short time in their life?
And that's happened. That's happened a lot.
Like,
Sometimes all I do is just make the connection. I don't even really serve them other than making the connection to somebody else. And that's happened actually more times than I can count, really. So I am a connector. I do love to connect with people. I love to understand where they're at and what their story is. And I love to get them to the right place. And oftentimes I'm not the right place. Okay. Sometimes I am, but oftentimes, probably more times than not, I'm not the right person. Because I have a particular style. I have a particular aura, whatever you want to call it, energy about me. And some people resonate with it and some people don't. And that's perfectly fine. So I try and help wherever I can. Sometimes maybe it's just the spark. Maybe it's just listening to a podcast and they say, oh, I need to go find John. He's a friend and he's already doing this for me. Maybe it's just helping them wake up, type of thing. So I think when I came up with the whole idea of my calling is to inspire calling, that was part of it. It's I can't control it. I can't force it. I just need to be here and be an inspiration and pass the light through that is not my light. It's coming from God.
I love it. I love it. And you know, you're humble in that regard, but you are doing a great service for our community, if you will. When I say community, I mean world, because anybody listening, they can come and join you. I mean, you go to coachdale.com, and what are we going to find when we go to coachdale.com?
Well, the first thing you're going to find is an out-of-date website because every website is out of date as soon as it's published. So there is some other stuff there. But if you go on my mailing list, that's going to have all the current stuff. If you go find me on LinkedIn, just under Coach Dale, that's going to have more current stuff than the website. But in general, what you're going to find is a work in progress. We're all works in progress, right? We're all being worked on by God. And so my message is definitely going through a work in progress as well. But yeah, you're going to find some tools, some resources, some ideas, some thoughts. But if it makes sense, reach out and connect with me, and I'll fill you in on all the latest stuff that I'm doing and see if any of it works for you.
Yeah. So when you consider, and you help people not only understand their calling, but also maybe take certain actions, right, in order to facilitate that calling. What are some steps that you may start with, if you don't mind?
Well, lots of times we start with the who piece or the identity piece, and that goes through some assessments that I have. I've got a spiritual gifts assessment. I use the Clifton Strengths to help people understand how they're wired, how God created them, and how to put all that together, because that is a pretty complex assessment. You get 34 talents and they interact with each other. So the combinations are astronomical, just even in the top 5 or top 10 type of thing. So it just is another way to say you are unique. I'll even throw out a stat that Gallup uses all the time: to have the same top 5 talents in the same order as anybody else in the world, the chance is 1 in 33 million. Okay, that kind of proves you're pretty unique, because you add the next 5 top 10 and then go on out to all 34. You're unique. It's just no question about it. And so just helping you understand that and get that into your model. Another piece that I can start with is the community piece and working with teamwork. I'm certified in the Working Genius assessment, and that's a new assessment, came out in 2021 from Patrick Lencioni, and it's a best assessment I've seen for working together with teams. And so, if you've got a team and you don't know how to interact with them sometimes, or you give them an assignment and they go do Y instead of X, which you want them to do, Working Genius can help with that. So there's some simple, easy ways to get started and see if it makes sense to go further down the line or not.
Nice. Awesome. I got to tell you, I've been inspired by your story, and thank you for sharing it with us. I can see how we all need to listen a little bit more, right? Because the signs are there. The signs are there. I grew up Roman Catholic, and it just never made full sense to me, right? And my family's still very Roman Catholic. They go to church all the time. And I went to church all the time. And I kept saying, there's something missing, something missing. And I felt like stand up, sit down, stand up, kneel, sit down. I was like, what is all this about? And one of the things that I read the Bible, and I said, if God is everywhere and God is in me, why do I have to go to church? And so I stopped going to church. But I still kept searching. What's out there? What am I missing? I'm not looking. I believe in God. I'm not looking for a different God, if you will. So one day I was talking to a client and she goes, "Oh, I go to this church over there." I'm like, "Really?" So she said, "Yeah, I used to be Roman Catholic too." And she became Christian and everything opened up. I'm like, "Huh." So this was sometime in December, um, almost 3 years ago. And I said, "I'm going to go to that church. I'm going to check it out." I pass it by all the time. And it's a Christian church. And I actually started January 1st. And it was a Sunday. And I've been going to it ever since. And the reason I love it is because I bring my Bible. And it's open your Bible, let's read the verse, let's understand it. I never got that in a Roman Catholic church. It
Yeah.
was this big book and they read in Latin. I'm like, I don't speak Latin.
Yeah.
So it didn't make sense for me. So I was like, but now I can actually read it and get to understand it. I was like, now it makes a lot of sense. And I've never stopped praying my whole life, but now I'm enjoying it so much more. So, but
Yeah.
yeah, I think that we need to be able to listen a little bit more because there is so much noise, right? And we need to learn how to drown out the noise and listen for our calling.
Yeah. Yeah. God does not shout, he whispers.
So you got to listen.
Got to listen closely.
Yeah. Dale, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate your time. Thank you, my friend. What would you recommend for anyone listening that if they want to start listening to their calling?
Well, I don't know if
Besides
this
the website, of course, they should
yeah,
all go to the website.
website, there's another website out there that might be of interest. It's actually called stepintoyourcalling.com. So just stepintoyourcalling.com. And that's a website where I offer a very specific program or challenge around taking those first steps to get into your calling.
Nice. Love it. Love it. All right, my friend. Thank you so much. Do me a favor, stay on for a minute. Everybody have yourself an exceptional day, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.